Hi, my name is Amara. I never imagined that the worst humiliation of my life would happen in a 5-star hotel lobby, in a dress I could barely afford, at the promotion party I helped pay for. My husband, Daniel, had just been promoted to regional director at a big logistics company. At least, that's what he told everyone. What no one knew was that I was the one who took the night shifts, skipped meals, and sold my jewellery so he could finish his MBA and wear that shiny suit he was so proud of. The invitation to the party looked beautiful when I first saw it on our kitchen counter. Heavy white card, gold lettering, the hotel logo shining at the top. But there was something missing. My name? It only said, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the promotion of Daniel Mensah." No, and wife? No +1. I picked it up carefully, pretending my hands weren't shaking. Maybe it's just a formal style, I told myself. Of course he'll want me there. I'm his wife. All week he'd been acting different. He worked later, smiled more at his phone than at me, and started using words like image and perception. Whenever I asked simple questions, what time is the event? Should I come early to help? He brushed me off. We'll talk later, Amara. It's a corporate thing. You won't understand. Still, I ironed his shirts, polished his shoes, and carefully altered my one good dress to make it look more elegant. It was a deep blue dress I had worn once, years ago, for our first anniversary dinner when we could only afford street food afterward. Back then, he'd held my hand and said, "I can't wait to show the world you're my wife." The night of the party, Birmingham's city centre was glowing. The hotel lobby was full of glass, marble, and soft golden lights. Women in sparkling gowns laughed lightly. Men in suits clinked glasses, and the smell of expensive perfume floated through the air. I arrived a little early, clutching a small black purse and trying to look like I belonged there. I had booked my own taxi because Daniel said he had to arrive with the team. That stung. But I told myself it was fine. I'd surprise him, he'd see me and smile like he used to. At the entrance to the ballroom, a young woman with a clipboard and a tight black dress smiled professionally. "Good evening, ma'am. Name, please?" "Amara Mensah," I replied. "I'm Daniel's wife." Her eyes travelled slowly from my hair to my shoes, then back up to my face. There was a tiny flicker of something there. Pity? Doubt? Before she looked down at her list. Amara. Her finger slid down the page. "I have Daniel Mensah +1, but the +1 name here is Clara." My heart squeezed. Ugh! The word Clara felt like ice in my chest. I tried to smile. That must be a mistake. I'm his wife. Maybe they just wrote the wrong name. She looked uncomfortable, glancing over my shoulder at the growing line of guests waiting to get in. "I'm really sorry, ma'am. I just have to go by what's on the list." "Maybe you could call him?" I stepped aside, my head buzzing, and dialed Daniel. He didn't pick up. I tried again. "The third time," he answered, his voice loud with music and laughter. "Amara, I'm a bit busy. Can this wait?" "I'm here," I said softly. "At the hotel. They say my name isn't on the list." There was a pause, then a sigh. Amara, I told you this is a corporate event, he said, stressing the word corporate as if it were poison on my tongue. I already have a +1. It's complicated. You shouldn't have come. His words hit me harder than any slap. What do you mean you already have a +1? I whispered. I'm your wife. Someone laughed loudly near him. I heard a woman's voice in the background saying, Danny, come on, the speeches are about to start. He lowered his voice, but I could still hear the irritation. Look, you make a scene. This is important for my image. You're not really dressed for this crowd. Just go home, Amara. We'll talk later. I closed my eyes, swallowing hard. Daniel, I used my last savings for a taxi here. Another pause. His tone turned cold. You're not welcome here, Amara. Don't embarrass me. The line went dead. For a moment, the lobby blurred. The chandeliers above me turned into bright circles of light as tears filled my eyes. I stood very still, breathing slowly, because if I moved too quickly, I knew I would run out of there and never stop. You are not welcome here. Those words echoed in my chest louder than the music leaking from the ballroom. The hostess with the clipboard glanced at me again, clearly wondering if she should ask me to leave, the way people do when they want to be polite but firm. Behind me, a couple in designer clothes complained softly that the line was slow. I forced a small smile and stepped away from the entrance. That's when I saw her, Clara. I had never met her, but I recognized her from the photos on Daniel's phone. He always said she was just a colleague. The colleague he smiled at his screen for, late at night, long after he'd stopped asking how my day was. She arrived in a shimmering silver dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair styled in loose waves. On her arm was my husband. He looked proud. Chest out, suit perfectly tailored, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Mr. Mensah, the same hostess beamed. Congratulations on your promotion, and this must be Clara. Yes, he smiled. Couldn't have done it without her. Without her, I felt something inside me crack. They were just a few steps away. He saw me. I know he did, because his eyes flickered, just for a second. Then he pretended not to notice. Clara followed his gaze and looked at me, just briefly. Her eyes slid over my simple blue dress, my slightly worn heels, my natural hair pulled back in a simple bun. She smiled, not kindly, but the way you smile at a stranger you'll never see again. Shall we? She said, turning back to Daniel. He nodded and walked past me as if I were invisible. I stood frozen, watching them move towards the entrance. I could hear her laugh as she said, Your company really knows how to throw a party. The hostess checked her list and waved them through easily. Welcome, she said cheerfully. Enjoy your evening. My evening had already shattered. For a few minutes, I just stood there, staring at the closed doors of the ballroom. Through the gap at the top, I could see flashes of light from the stage. The muffled sound of applause drifted out, as if the whole room was celebrating my humiliation. A security guard nearby started to approach me, his face carefully blank. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "Are you attending the event? Do you need assistance?" I straightened my shoulders. "No," I said quietly. "I'm fine." Fine. I was anything but fine. I walked away from the ballroom entrance and found a small seating area near a tall window where I could see the city lights outside. People brushed past me. Perfume, cologne, laughter, clinking glasses, but no one really saw me. I sat down, placed my purse on my lap, and took a deep breath. "You're not welcome here." The words hurt, but underneath the pain, something else started to wake up. A small, steady anger. Not the kind that makes you scream and throw things, but the quiet one that makes you see everything clearly for the first time. Because here's what Daniel had forgotten. Yes, he was being celebrated tonight. Yes, the company thought he had vision and leadership. Yes, Clara was his shiny, polished +1. But the loan that kept him in school when he wanted to drop out, the rent that was paid when his salary was late, the emergency money that appeared when his mother fell sick 3 years ago, that came from me. From a small online business I had built quietly in the background, while he called it your little side hustle. He didn't know that my little side hustle had become something much bigger. He didn't know that one of my biggest clients, someone I had helped for months without ever meeting in person, was closely connected to his company. He didn't know that the real boss he was trying so hard to impress already knew my name. I wiped my eyes, stood up, and looked once more at the ballroom doors. "If I'm not welcome here as your wife," I whispered, "we'll see how you feel when they welcome me as something else." Intimate, and that was the moment everything began to change. Because a few minutes later, the real boss walked in, and he didn't walk past me. He walked straight towards me. When the real boss walked in, I didn't recognize him at first. He wasn't what I expected a big company owner to look like. No loud entrance, no crowd around him, no one rushing to grab his coat. Just a tall man in a simple, well-cut navy suit, walking with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. He glanced around the lobby once, his eyes skimming over the people at the bar, the guests checking in, the security guard pretending not to be bored. Then his gaze landed on me. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. Why would someone like that be looking at a woman sitting alone in a blue dress, clutching a cheap purse like a lifeline? But he didn't look away. He kept walking, straight toward me. "Amara?" he said. Hearing my name from his lips felt like being pulled out of deep water. "Yes?" I replied, standing up slowly. He smiled, and the lines around his eyes deepened with warmth. "It's really you," he said. "I wasn't sure I'd recognize you without the little flower icon next to your name." It clicked. "Mr. Lewis?" I whispered, because that was the name on one of my biggest client accounts. The man whose orders had kept my small business alive, even when Daniel told me to focus on real work instead of playing entrepreneur on the internet. He laughed softly. "Please call me Stephen. We've only exchanged 300 emails after all." I stared at him, stunned. My brain raced back over late nights at my laptop, sending invoices, tracking shipments, answering messages that always started with, "Dear Amara, thank you once again for your patience. We truly appreciate your reliability." That was him. The man whose company I supplied high-end custom gift boxes for, boxes that went to their top clients, filled with curated items I had selected, packed, and shipped myself from our tiny living room. I had pictured him as older, maybe distant, maybe living in some glass office in London. I had never imagined he would be standing in front of me, in Birmingham, at the very hotel where my husband had just told me I wasn't welcome. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, glancing toward the ballroom. "Isn't the event inside?" His question burned. "Yes," I said carefully, "it is." He watched me for a moment, sharp eyes reading what I didn't say. "Are you here for the promotion party?" he asked. My throat tightened. "My husband is being celebrated tonight," I replied finally. "Daniel Mensah. He works at your company." I saw it then. A flicker of recognition. "Mensah," he repeated. "Regional Director? Logistics Department?" I nodded. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "He's your husband?" The word "is" felt heavier than ever. "Yes," I said, "at least on paper." Something in my voice must have betrayed the storm inside me, because his expression shifted. "Would you like to come in?" he asked gently. "You shouldn't be sitting out here alone." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "I'm not on the list," I said. "Apparently only Clara is." And he didn't ask who Clara was. He didn't need to. He looked toward the ballroom doors, where laughter and music leaked through the cracks. "I see," he said quietly. There was a short silence. The hotel air conditioning hummed softly behind us. He turned back to me. "You know, when my assistant first recommended your business, she said, 'There's this woman who never misses a deadline, even when our order is ridiculous. If she says it will be there on Tuesday at 10, it arrives on Tuesday at 9:59. I smiled weakly. "I remember that order. It nearly killed me," he chuckled. "And yet you did it," he said. "Even when there was a courier strike and you had to hire a taxi to deliver the final batch yourself." I blinked. "How did you know about the taxi?" He shrugged lightly. "I pay attention when people go to extraordinary lengths to keep their word. My manager thought you were crazy, spending your own money to keep a promise. I thought you were exactly the kind of person I like working with." His words soothed something raw inside me. "Thank you," I said softly. He studied my face, then nodded toward the seating area. "Sit with me for a minute," he said. "I want to hear the real story of how you built that business." We never had time to talk beyond invoices and shipping labels. We sat down, two people who should have met in an office boardroom, but instead were sharing a quiet corner of a hotel lobby while my husband smiled on some stage. I took a deep breath. "I started 3 years ago," I began, "right after Daniel lost his job. Back then, life was different. We lived in a small flat with noisy neighbours and thin walls. Daniel had just been laid off from a warehouse supervisor role, and I was working part-time at a supermarket, stacking shelves and smiling at customers who never remembered my name. Every night, he would sit on the couch, scrolling through job listings, his frustration growing. "They want experience in things I've never even heard of," he grumbled. "How am I supposed to compete with people who had everything handed to them?" I understood his pain. We came from families that had fought for every bit of security they had. His mother, especially, liked to remind me of the times they had gone to bed hungry. "You don't know what hardship is, Amara," she would say. We suffered. Daniel deserves a soft life now. She never said it out loud, but I always felt the unspoken part, and you should be grateful we let you in. When Daniel decided to go back to school for his MBA, we debated for weeks. We can't afford it, I said. Not without help. My mother will support us, he insisted. She said if I focus on my career, the whole family will benefit. His mother did help. At first, a few months of rent here, a grocery shop there, but old resentment doesn't disappear just because someone has money. Every time she paid a bill, she made sure I knew whose name was on the transfer. Remember this, she would say. I'm doing this for my son. Meanwhile, I picked up extra shifts, selling my jewellery piece by piece, pretending I didn't notice how my wedding ring had grown loose on my finger from the weight I'd lost. One night, after a double shift, I came home to find Daniel asleep on the sofa, his laptop open, an unpaid electricity bill on the table. I sat down, exhausted, and opened my phone to distract myself. An ad popped up. Start your own online store from home. I almost scrolled past it. Who was I to start a business? I didn't have investors, or an office, or a fancy degree. All I had were tired hands and a brain that refused to stop planning solutions. But that night, something stubborn inside me whispered, why not you? I had always loved packaging gifts. Even as a child, I would save wrapping paper, ribbons, little boxes, and reuse them to make birthday presents look special. At the supermarket, customers often complimented how neatly I packed their bags. I clicked the ad. For the next 3 months, every free hour went into learning. Free tutorials, late-night videos, cheap ebooks on starting a small business. I experimented with different designs, sourcing materials from discounts and clearance sections. When I finally launched my online store, Amara's Essence, I did it quietly. No fanfare, no announcements. Even Daniel didn't take it seriously at first. It's cute, he said. Just don't let it distract you from real work. We need money, not hobbies. He didn't see the first 5 orders that came in. He didn't see me printing labels at midnight, wrapping boxes with shaking hands, whispering to myself, don't mess this up. He definitely didn't see the email from a corporate buyer 6 months later. Dear Amara, we are interested in a bulk order of 500 custom gift boxes for a client event. That buyer was Stephen's assistant. I almost deleted the email, thinking it was spam. 500? I breathed. That's impossible. But impossibility doesn't pay rent. So I wrote back, my fingers trembling. Thank you for reaching out. I can do it. What did your husband say when you told him? Stephen asked now, gently pulling me back to the present. I hesitated. I didn't, I admitted. Not at first. I didn't want him to worry, or laugh, or tell me to say no because people like us don't get opportunities like that. I only told him after I'd already sent the first 100, I continued. He thought I was exaggerating. He said, if you mess this up, they'll never pay you. Stephen nodded, thoughtfully. I remember that order, he said. My assistant panicked when the courier strike started. She thought the whole event would be ruined. She called me, I said quietly, begged me to find a solution. I had 2 options. Refund the money and admit defeat, or rent a taxi and deliver every box myself. And you chose the taxi. I chose the taxi, I confirmed, even though it meant we had almost nothing left that month. We both fell silent for a moment, remembering the same event from two sides of the email chain. I remembered sitting in the back of that taxi, boxes piled around me, praying the driver wouldn't take a wrong turn. I remembered carrying them into the office, my arms aching, trying to look professional, even though my shoes were worn at the edges. He remembered receiving a message from his assistant. She did it. All delivered early. Clients are thrilled. From that day, Stephen said, I told my team, if Amara says yes, trust her. She'll find a way. I swallowed hard. Meanwhile, I said, my husband told me to stop stressing over small things and focus on looking presentable for his future colleagues. So, he knew you were working with us? Stephen asked. Yes, I replied, but in his mind it was nothing. He used to joke, imagine if your little gift boxes ended up at my company one day. I met Stephen's eyes. They did, I said. He just never bothered to ask where they came from. There it was, the truth that hurt more than anything. It wasn't just that he'd chosen another woman as his +1. It was that he had never really seen me. Not my effort, not my sacrifices, not my quiet victories. Stephen leaned back, exhaling slowly. You know, he said, we have a saying at the office. Operations keep the company moving. Relationships keep it alive. He looked at me with a small smile. You're both. I shook my head modestly. I'm just trying to survive. No, he said firmly. You're building. There's a difference. His words settled over me, gentle but solid. From the ballroom, the sound of a microphone crackled. A voice boomed through the speakers, muffled by the doors. Let's all give a warm welcome to our newly promoted Regional Director, Mr. Daniel Mensah. Applause erupted. Through the narrow glass panel, I could see silhouettes turning toward the stage. Stephen glanced at the doors. You know, he's told everyone he did this alone, he said quietly. Men like that usually do. I looked down at my hands. I believed in him, I whispered. I still do, in some way. I just didn't expect believing in him to mean erasing myself. He tilted his head, considering me. Tell me honestly, Amara, he said. If you had to choose between saving this marriage exactly as it is, or saving yourself, which would you choose? No one had ever asked me that. Not my parents. Not my friends. Certainly not my husband. I thought of the long nights, the quiet insults, the way he had looked through me at the entrance as if I were just another stranger. I don't know yet, I admitted. But tonight, he showed me what I mean to him. And it wasn't much. Stephen nodded once, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. Well, he said, standing up, I can't fix your marriage, but I can fix one thing right now. He extended his hand. Come with me, he said. You may not be welcome here as his +1, but you are absolutely welcome here as my guest. I stared at his hand. If I took it, everything would change. There would be no going back to pretending, no more hiding in the background while Daniel took the credit for everything we'd built together. The ballroom doors loomed before us, glowing and loud. Behind them, my husband was probably smiling, raising a glass, shoulders squared with pride. He didn't know that just a few meters away, the woman he'd pushed aside was about to walk in with the one person whose opinion really mattered tonight. I stood up and placed my hand in Stephen's. "All right," I said quietly. "Let's go." And for the first time that evening, I walked toward the ballroom not as someone's unwanted burden, but as the woman who was about to turn his celebration into a lesson he would never forget. Stephen's hand was steady in mine as we walked toward the ballroom doors. The same hostess who had blocked me earlier straightened up when she saw him. "Good evening, Mr. Lewis," she said quickly. Her voice was suddenly softer, more careful. "We're honoured to have you here." So this is how respect sounds, I thought. Not loud, just unquestioning. "Good evening," he replied. "This is my guest, Mrs. Amara Mensah." Her eyes widened. For a moment, confusion flashed across her face. I could almost see her remembering that awkward woman in a blue dress from a few minutes earlier, the one who wasn't on the list. "Of course," she said, recovering quickly. "Welcome, Mrs. Mensah. Please go right in." Just like that. No clipboard, no doubt. "No, you're not on the list." Because when you walk with the right person, doors that were slammed in your face a moment ago open without a sound. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of soft lights and shiny surfaces. A crystal chandelier hung above the centre of the room, scattering light over white-clothed tables and clusters of people holding flutes of champagne. A banner stretching across the back wall read, "Celebrating Excellence, Regional Promotions Night." Stephen moved with quiet ease, nodding politely to people who recognized him, and instantly straightened their backs. I could feel eyes on us. Who is she? Why is she with him? Is she someone important? The irony made me want to laugh. On the stage, the announcer was finishing his introduction. A man who has shown dedication, innovation, and strong leadership in driving our logistics operations forward. Please welcome our new regional director, Mr. Daniel Mensah. Applause erupted. There he was. My husband stood under the bright lights in his perfect suit, tie immaculate, smile rehearsed. He looked older than when we first met, but in that moment he also looked like the man he had always wanted to be, admired, applauded, untouchable. I noticed Clara standing near the front, her silver dress glittering as she clapped proudly. My mother-in-law was beside her, dressed in a rich gold gown that screamed money. She had come to Birmingham from Ghana just for this, she'd said. "For my son's big moment. Our family's going up, Amara. Try not to hold him back." Daniel stepped up to the microphone, adjusting it slightly. "Thank you," he began. "This promotion means a lot to me." I watched his eyes scan the crowd, soaking in the admiration. 3 years ago, he continued, I was in a very different place. I'd lost my job. I had nothing. But I worked hard, I stayed focused, and I kept my eyes on the future. My jaw clenched. "Nothing?" he continued. "I decided to invest in myself, go back to school, and chase opportunities that scared me. It wasn't easy, but I refused to give up. Today, standing here, I'm proof that with determination anyone can rise." The room nodded, some people murmuring their approval. He left out so much. He didn't mention the woman who took extra shifts so he could study. He didn't mention the wife who sold her jewellery to pay for his books. He didn't mention how many times he had nearly quit, only to be pulled back by a voice that told him he was capable. My voice. My mother-in-law dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "That's my boy," she whispered loudly enough for those around her to hear. "He did it all by himself. No one helped him. No one." Clara smiled, placing a hand over her heart. I felt Stephen glance sideways at me. "Is this difficult to watch?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, "but I think I need to see it clearly one last time." Daniel continued, warming to his own story. "There were people," he said, "who told me to compromise, to accept less, to lower my standards." His eyes flicked briefly toward the back of the room, not yet seeing me, but knowing in his bones that somewhere a memory of me was listening. But I knew I deserved more. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. Stephen's lips twitched, but he said nothing. When the applause finally died down, the company's HR director stepped up. "Thank you, Daniel," she said. "We're so proud to have you on the leadership team. Now I'd like to invite our company's founder and owner, Mr. Stephen Lewis, to say a few words." The room shifted. People straightened. Soft conversations stopped. Even the clinking of glasses paused for a heartbeat. Stephen smiled politely. "Shall we?" he murmured. We walked together toward the front. As we moved, whispers floated around us. "That's him. Is that the CEO? Who's the woman he's with?" My mother-in-law turned, curiosity on her face. Her eyes landed on Stephen first, then slid to me. Her smile froze. "Amara?" Before she could say anything, we reached the stage. The HR director stepped aside to let Stephen pass. Daniel, still riding the high of his own applause, turned to greet his boss. I watched his confident smile flicker, then falter when he saw me standing beside Stephen. For a split second, his mask slipped. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, then closed. "Mr. Lewis," he stammered, quickly regaining composure. "I didn't know you were coming tonight. It's an honor." Stephen shook his hand briefly. "Congratulations on your promotion, Daniel," he said evenly. "Thank you, sir," Daniel replied, glancing at me again. I didn't realize you knew my wife. Now he remembered. "I do," Stephen said. "Very well, in fact." He turned to the audience, taking the microphone with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "I won't keep you long. Tonight is about celebrating the people who keep this company moving." He spoke about growth, strategy, and all the usual things people in his position talk about. But then his tone shifted. "Titles like manager and director sound impressive," he said. "They look good on LinkedIn. But in my experience, the people who truly keep a company alive often don't have fancy titles." He paused. "They're the ones answering emails at midnight, the ones making sure promises are kept, even when no one is watching, the ones who go the extra mile because their name is attached to their work, even if no one says it on a microphone." People nodded thoughtfully. Daniel forced a smile, assuming this was still about him. Stephen glanced at me, then back at the crowd. "Some months ago," he continued, "we had a critical client event. We needed hundreds of custom boxes delivered on a very tight schedule. There were delays, strikes, all kinds of problems. Many people would have given up, refunded the money, and blamed the circumstances. He looked at Daniel now. Someone didn't. Murmurs rippled through the room. Instead, Stephen said, this person hired a taxi out of her own pocket, delivered every box personally, and made sure our client never knew there had been any issues. He smiled. That person isn't on our payroll. She doesn't have a title here, but she is one of the reasons we renewed that contract, and one of the reasons we can stand here, celebrating growth. His voice softened. Her name is Mrs. Amara Mensah. For a heartbeat, the room was completely silent. Then, all at once, hundreds of eyes turned to me. I felt my face grow hot, but I lifted my chin. In the front row, Clara's mouth dropped open. My mother-in-law's hand tightened around her purse, knuckles white. Daniel stared at me as if he'd never seen me before. Stephen extended his hand in my direction. Amara, he said, would you join me for a moment? My legs felt like they were made of air and stone at the same time, but I walked forward. It was the longest walk of my life. Every step took me past people who had been laughing and whispering a few minutes ago, people who had probably seen my husband walk in on the arm of another woman. Now their faces were full of curiosity, respect even. I reached the stage, and Stephen helped me up the shallow steps. Standing under the lights, facing the crowd, I realized something. I wasn't shaking. I thought I would be terrified, but instead I felt strangely calm. Amara is the owner of a business some of you may know, Stephen said. Amara's Essence, the company behind many of the gifts we send to our most valued partners. More whispers. I've never met anyone so committed to keeping a promise, he added. She represents the kind of integrity I want this company to be known for. He handed me the microphone. Would you like to say a few words? He asked. A few hours earlier, I would have said no. I would have hidden behind someone else's success, as I always had. But tonight, in front of my husband, his mother, and the woman he'd chosen over me, I found my voice. Good evening, I began softly. The sound of my own voice through the speakers startled me. My name is Amara. I didn't plan to speak tonight. In fact, I didn't even know I would be allowed in. A ripple passed through the audience. I continued. Like my husband said, 3 years ago our lives were very different. He had lost his job. We were broke. We were scared. I glanced at Daniel. He stood stiffly, eyes fixed on me. I believed in him, I said. I still believe that he is capable. That's why I worked extra shifts. That's why I sold my things. That's why I stayed up late researching how to start a business so that we could stand somewhere better one day. I looked at the crowd. I didn't start my business to compete with him. I started it to help us survive. My mother-in-law shifted in her seat, frowning. But somewhere along the way, I went on, the story changed. It became a story about how one person did everything alone, how one person rose from nothing with no help. I turned my head slightly toward her. That's not the full story. Silence. When you tell a story and erase the people who bled for you, you may impress strangers, I said quietly, but you betray yourself. My voice didn't shake. I'm grateful to this company for giving my husband a chance, I added. He worked hard, yes. He showed up, he studied, but I also worked hard. I also showed up, just in rooms that didn't have microphones. I smiled faintly. I'm not asking for applause, I said. I just want to remind everyone here of something simple. If you have someone at home who supported you, who believed in you when you had nothing, don't forget them when you have something. A few people nodded. Someone in the back clapped once, sharply, then stopped, unsure. I was told tonight that I wasn't welcome here, I finished. But the truth is, my effort has been in this room longer than I have. In your gift boxes, in your client relationships, in your renewals. I looked at Daniel. So whether or not I'm on the guest list, I said, I am part of the story. I handed the microphone back to Stephen. For a moment, there was total silence. Then, slowly at first, scattered claps began. One table, then another. Within seconds, the room was filled with applause. Not as wild as what Daniel had received, but warmer, real. My mother-in-law looked furious, but even she couldn't stop the sound. Clara stared at the floor. Daniel's face was pale. Stephen waited for the applause to calm, then spoke again. Thank you, Amara, he said. That was exactly what many of us here needed to hear. He turned to Daniel. Mr. Menzer, he said, I look forward to seeing how you lead with that same level of honesty and gratitude in your new role. The message beneath his words was clear, even if he didn't spell it out. You are being watched. Not just for numbers and reports, but for character. The formal part of the program ended, and people started to move. Conversation buzzing. Some came up to me. Your speech was powerful. You must be so proud of your business. I've received one of your gift boxes. They're beautiful. For the first time in a long time, people were talking to me not as someone's wife, but as myself. Daniel took his time approaching. First, he spoke to his colleagues, gave a few forced laughs, tried to act as if everything was normal, but eventually he had no choice. He walked toward me, his step slow, his posture stiff. Amara, he said, when he finally stood in front of me. Up close, I could see the panic behind his eyes. Daniel? I replied calmly. He glanced around, making sure no one was too close. I didn't know you were coming, he began weakly. If you had just told me. I did tell you, I cut in gently. At the door. You told me I wasn't welcome. He flinched. You misunderstood, he said. It was a professional event. You know how these things work. I just didn't want you to feel out of place. I held his gaze. I didn't feel out of place, I said. Not once. I walked in with the person who actually respects my work. Colour rose in his cheeks. You embarrassed me, he hissed under his breath. In front of my boss, in front of everyone. No, I said, my voice steady. You embarrassed yourself. I just turned on the light. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes darted to where his mother was standing, a few meters away, watching us like a hawk. We'll talk at home, he muttered. This isn't the place. He was wrong. This was exactly the place. No, I said quietly. We won't. He stared at me. What is that supposed to mean? I took a breath. It means I'm done begging for a seat at your table, I said. I have my own now. His jaw clenched. What? You think just because you made some boxes and gave a little speech, you're better than me? He scoffed. This is my world, Amara. You don't belong here. There it was again. You don't belong, I smiled, but there was no softness in it. Maybe not, I said, but I belong somewhere. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded paper I had placed there weeks ago, just in case, the one I had never had the courage to show him. My insurance, my line in the sand. I pressed it into his hand. What's this? He frowned. Read it, I said. He opened it and scanned the content. His eyes widened. This is a separation agreement? He whispered. Yes, I replied. I drafted it after the third time you made me feel small for having dreams that didn't revolve around you. His hands shook slightly. You can't be serious. I am, I said. I came tonight ready to either walk beside a man who respected me or walk away from one who didn't. Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Now I know which choice to make. He looked around as if the walls themselves could give him an answer. What about everything we've built? He tried. What about us? I thought of long nights, broken promises, gaslighting, the message of "You're not welcome here" echoing in my ears. What about me? I countered softly. Did that ever matter to you? He had no answer. Stephen approached us then, sensing the tension but respecting the boundary. Amara, he said, whenever you're ready, I'd like to talk more about a potential partnership. We're expanding our gift and client care program. I think your business could play a bigger role. My breath caught. A partnership? I repeated. Yes, he said. Of course we'll go over terms properly, but I don't like working with people who don't know their own value. And tonight you showed me you do. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I managed. Daniel watched this exchange, horror dawning on his face. You're offering her a contract? He asked, voice sharp. With the company? Stephen's expression remained neutral. We're discussing possibilities, he said. Given how important client relationships are, having someone like Amara officially on board would be a smart move. He looked at Daniel. Besides, he added, strong leaders aren't threatened by their partner's success. They're proud of it. You was Anne. The implication hung heavy between us. Stephen politely excused himself, leaving us to the quiet wreckage of what we used to be. I turned back to Daniel. We're not finished talking, he said, desperation creeping into his tone. Yes, we are, I replied gently. I'll leave out in the morning. We'll sort the details through lawyers. My mother-in-law rushed over, having seen enough to sense danger. What is this nonsense? She demanded. Amara, you can't do this. Do you know what this promotion cost him? Do you know what this marriage cost me? I asked calmly. She sputtered. You ungrateful girl. We gave you a place in our family. You gave me a place as long as I was useful, I said. As long as I was quiet. As long as I didn't shine brighter than your sun. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. I bought the textbooks that got him through his exams, I continued. I cooked in your cramped kitchen when there was no food in your fridge. I sent you money every month after your surgery, even when you pretended you didn't need it. She froze. "What money?" Daniel demanded, turning to her. "What is she talking about?" I smiled sadly. "You never asked," I said. "You were too busy being the hero in your own story." I stepped back. For years, I sacrificed my peace to keep this family together. Tonight, I'm choosing something else. "What?" he hissed. "What could possibly be more important than this?" I took a deep breath. "Myself," I said simply. Then, without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, not running, not hiding, just walking. As I moved through the crowd, some people touched my arm lightly, nodding in quiet support. A woman whispered, "Good for you." Another said, "You're brave. I wish I'd done what you're doing years ago." Outside, the air was cool against my face. I stepped into the night with empty hands, but a full heart. I didn't know exactly what the future held. I didn't know how hard it would be to start over, to explain to my family, to sign papers and divide a life in two. What I did know was this: I would never again beg to be welcome in a place that was built on my pain. If someone wanted me in their life, they would have to make room, not just in their home. In their story, 6 months later, I was back in the same hotel lobby. Not as a scared wife in a blue dress this time, but as a business owner walking in for a strategy meeting. "Good morning, Mrs. Mensah," the receptionist smiled. "The Lewis team is expecting you on the 3rd floor." Every time someone called me Mrs. Mensah now, it meant me, not Daniel's wife. It meant the name on the contract, the invoices, the bank transfers. After that promotion night, things changed quickly. The separation was not easy. My mother cried. My aunties whispered, "Are you sure? A man with a good job is hard to find." But when I played them a recording of his words, "You're not welcome here," they fell silent. I moved into a small flat above a bakery. The walls were thin, the stairs were steep, but the keys were mine. For the first week, I slept on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and rolls of ribbon, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Then my email pinged. Subject: Proposal, expanded partnership. Stephen's team had drafted a contract. More orders, longer-term agreement, better rates. They wanted Amara's Essence to become their official partner for all premium client gifting. I stared at the numbers, my heart pounding. With this contract, I could stop counting every pound at the till. I could hire help. I could breathe. I took a deep breath and did something the old me would never have done. I negotiated. "Thank you for the offer," I wrote. "I'm honoured. I have a few suggestions about pricing, production timelines, and co-branding." They agreed to most of them. Within weeks, my living room transformed into a small studio. Then, when the neighbours began to complain about deliveries at odd hours, I upgraded to a real workspace, a tiny unit in an industrial estate with white walls and endless potential. I hired 2 part-time helpers, then 3 women who, like me, needed a chance. Mothers who couldn't work fixed hours, immigrants with experience but no UK references. We laughed, we packed, we listened to stories on YouTube during late-night rushes and other women who turned pain into lessons. My business wasn't little anymore. It was a company. One afternoon, While I was printing labels, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hello, Amara. It's Daniel." For a moment, the room shrank around me. We hadn't spoken in months, except through lawyers. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "How are you?" he asked. "I heard your business is doing well." Rumors travel fast when people are secretly watching the ones they thought would fail. "I'm fine, thank you," I replied. There was an awkward pause. "My contract wasn't renewed," he said eventually. "They said there were concerns about my leadership style. I think your friend the CEO doesn't like me." I closed my eyes briefly. "It's not about liking you," I said. "It's about trust." He exhaled shakily. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "That night, I didn't realize how badly I'd treated you until I watched you walk away." This was the apology I had begged for in my heart for years. Now that it was finally here, it felt small. "I hope you learn from it," I said gently. "For the next woman in your life." "I want that to be you," he said quickly. "Amara, can we try again? I've changed. I'll support your business." I interrupted him softly. "Daniel," I said, "you didn't clap for me when I was small. Don't chase me now that I'm shining." Silence. "I don't hate you," I added. "I just love myself enough now not to go back." There was nothing left to say. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the rows of finished boxes lined up like soldiers, each one carrying a piece of the life I had built. Later, through mutual friends, I heard the rest. Clara and Daniel didn't last. When his career stalled and the fancy dinners slowed, her interest faded. My mother-in-law told anyone who would listen that I had abandoned the family. But quietly, when no one was looking, she sent me a message. "Amara, I heard you are helping women with jobs. Do you have space for one more cleaner? I can work." I stared at the text for a long time. She was proud. She was harsh. She had hurt me deeply. But she had also raised the man I had once loved, in the best way she knew how. I met her for tea. She arrived in a simple dress, without jewelry or loud words. "I was wrong about you," she said without looking up. "I thought my son was the prize. I didn't see you were the blessing." Tears stung my eyes. "I can't hire you as a cleaner," I said gently. Her shoulders sagged. "But," I continued, "we're starting a new line of boxes inspired by African homes and stories. I need someone who knows our old traditions, someone who can tell me, this pattern feels like home. This proverb speaks truth." She looked up slowly. "You mean like a consultant?" she asked, unsure of the word. I smiled. "Yes," I said, "like a consultant, paid properly, with respect." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that for me?" she whispered. "After everything I said." "Because you are part of my story," I replied, "and I choose to rewrite the ending." That night, as I closed the studio, I recorded a voice note for myself. The way the storyteller on YouTube always ends with a lesson. "If you are listening to this," I said, "I want you to remember something. When someone tells you you're not welcome here, it doesn't mean you don't belong anywhere. It just means you're standing in the wrong room." I smiled. "Build your own room," I continued. Invite people who clap for you when you have nothing and when you have everything, and never ever bite the hand that feeds you, especially if that hand is your own. I pressed stop. In the quiet that followed, I realized I wasn't the woman in the blue dress at the door anymore. I was the woman holding the keys,